tour. It was while in India that he was diagnosed with leukemia. He died aged 42, and a memorial service was held in his honor in Westminster Abbey, the first such honor for a sportsman. See you next time on Bet You Didn't Know, compliments of Sigismund Consultants, Inc.
Drink Pepsi Black for Max Taste, no sugar. Pepsi Black time, 18 hours or 6 p.m.
The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news comes to you with the compliments of Kentucky Fried Chicken KFC. With the news at this time, I'm Dennis Chabrol. Good evening. First, the highlights. The former head of the Special Organized Crime Unit of the Guyanese Police Force has turned himself over to police after a wanted bulletin was issued for him last week. Former President David Granger wants Suriname to stop issuing threats of force to acquire the New River Triangle and use it as a leverage to sign agreements. Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony says Guyana is working on revising its laws on suicide. A civil society organization, Article 13, has criticized President Irfan Ali for allegedly breaching the Constitution by not taking steps to appoint several constitutional commissions. And regionally, the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Gaston Brown, says measures will be put in place to enforce vaccine mandates in the private sector. And Prime Minister Brown, as chairman of CARICOM, says he is requesting antiviral medication for COVID treatment from the UK and the US for CARICOM countries. Internationally, Poland says it has repelled attempts by migrants to enter the country at its eastern border with Belarus, warning that thousands more were on the way. The details of these and other stories in a moment.
KFC cares about you. Have your favorite chicken delivered from a branch near you by ordering online from their Facebook page at KFCGY. That's KFCGY. Remember, their current delivery hours are 9:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. Enjoy tasty KFC in the comfort of your home or office. KFC.
It's finger licking good.
And now the news in detail. Former President David Granger is calling on Suriname to refrain from issuing threats of force to acquire the New River Triangle, some 15 square kilometers of Guyana's territory bordering Suriname. Former President Granger, in his weekly public interest show, says the recent inquiries by the media on possible discussion between President Ali and President Santoki following his visit to Guyana is cause for concern. Mr. Granger also cites the issue of a section of Suriname calling for the New River Triangle issue to be sorted out before bridging the Corentyne River.
So this is my message. The big problem between Guyana and Suriname is the question of territorial sovereignty. The second big problem is Suriname's threat, the actual use of force against Guyana. And we call on Suriname to refrain from threatening to use force or from actually using force in an attempt to get territory which does not belong to them. Guyana will not give up 1 square centimeter of territory.
Mr. Granger highlights that for decades, Guyana and its neighbors to the east, Suriname, had signed several memoranda of understanding, but have not signed agreements as the New River Triangle is being used by Suriname as leverage.
But this case must not be allowed either to obstruct the development between the two countries, nor must it be used as a lever by Suriname to try to pressure Guyana into making agreements which are not in our interest.
The former president says there must be mutual respect between the two countries, as CARICOM member states and Suriname must publicly declare it's not interested in using force against Guyana.
If we are to build a long-term relationship with Suriname, trade and commerce, military relations, within the framework of the Caribbean community, it has to be based on respect. And that respect has to be within the framework of Guyana's borders. Those borders are immutable. We did have an incident in 1966 in which Venezuela seized the island of Ancocco, and up to now, Guyana has never been able to recover that island of Ancocco. Venezuela used military force, and Venezuela continues to threaten the Republic of Guyana. And we must not allow the Surinamese to feel that they could get away with the same type of behavior in the East. What we need from Suriname is a declaration, an unambiguous declaration, that it will refrain from the use of force against Guyana. We have never had that declaration in all of our history.
Mr. Granger says he's confident that Suriname will lose its case if it is taken to the International Court of Justice, ICJ. He expresses little hope in the border commission that was set up to resolve the issue, but the commission is now defunct for decades. President Chandrika Prasad Santokhi of Suriname, in responding to questions from the media about what discussions he had with President Irfaan Ali, said the border matter was referred to the Border Commission. Granger cautioned the PPP administration to be careful and quickly refer the New River Triangle to the International Court of Justice. A civil group named Article 13 has criticized President Irfaan Ali for allegedly breaching the Constitution by failing to activate constitutional commissions. The civil rights organization is threatening legal action to ensure that President Ali complies with the provisions of the Constitution. The group says it is putting the government on notice that unless the issue of the Public Procurement Commission and the tribunal are resolved promptly, Article 13 will take legal and other action to force the government to abide by the Constitution. Article 13 says it is deeply concerned with the failure by the Irfaan Ali-led administration to constitute a long list of constitutional and statutory bodies and offices required for the proper functioning of the country. The civil society organization wants Governance Minister Gail Teixeira, the minister, to provide a full list of the statutory bodies and the dates they expired. Article 13 says the announcement by the President that he will address the issue of the constitutional commissions on his return from the Global Climate Change Conference is welcomed but far from satisfactory. Police have confirmed that the former head of the Special Organized Crime Unit SOCO, Sidney James, for whom a wanted bulletin was issued, turned himself into police. The former Assistant Police Commissioner turned himself into police today after the wanted bulletin. He is wanted for questioning in connection with a series of reports of allegedly obtaining money by false pretense and fraud. Mr. James was accompanied by attorneys at law Dexter Smart and Javon Cox, in whose presence he was questioned by SOCO officers at SOCO headquarters. He was then released on $300,000 station bail. Former House Speaker Ralph Ramkaran is urging the government to swiftly establish the Judicial Service Commission and that steps be taken to appoint more High Court judges. He also wants to see an increase in the required number of judges for the Court of Appeal in an effort to deal with the backlog of cases. Mr. Ramkaran recommends that a complement of Court of Appeal judges be increased from 5 to 7 or at least 6. He says that 3 judges have been presiding over the Court of Appeal. According to the prominent Guyanese lawyer, there is a backlog in the Court of Appeal of about 5 years, due mainly to the chronic shortage of judges in that court. He says if the required number of justices of appeal is increased to 7, the backlog of cases in that court can be cleared if 2 sets of 3 judges preside over cases. According to Mr. Ramkran, the Chief Justice, who is an ex officio Justice of Appeal, can be called in to sit for a full sitting of the bench. He reasons that with 6 judges, 2 panels of 3 can be sitting continuously so that the backlog is cleared and justice is not delayed. Looking at the situation in the High Court, Mr. Ramkran says while the required number of High Court judges is 20, there are only 12. President Ali recently promised to move ahead with a number of these appointments on his return from the conference of the party's climate change summit in Glasgow. Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony says Guyana is working on revising its laws on suicide. The health minister was at the time addressing a stakeholder conference on mental health in Guyana to devise a plan of action for suicide prevention. The minister says while the laws on suicide have changed in most countries, Guyana's outdated law still remains but needs revising.
Over the last couple of months, however, I've spoken to my colleague at the Attorney General's office, Mr. Nandalal, and we have been able to do a draft suicide prevention bill, and hopefully we could get that on the parliamentary agenda. And if we do this year, then we will be able to pass it and change those old things that have been there that does not really create an enabling environment in how what we need to do to prevent suicide in Guyana.
In addition to revise the suicide law, the health minister told the forum that Guyana will be depending on a review done by the Pan American Health Organization to formulate a more responsive suicide plan for the country.
And therefore, from the review that PAHO has done, we would like to also now work with stakeholders to develop a new plan going forward from 2021 to 2026. But this one, we want to make sure that we use it, because if we don't, we'll just be not impacting the problem. That the new plan that we'll be developing next year, that we will be able to get something that is more responsive to the types of challenges that we have before us.
Guyana's law will be tailored to allow for sampling using newer technology. The conference has listed the using of genes from saliva.
One of the studies would be doing some interesting thing, collecting saliva, and that perhaps would be added to do some examination of, or looking for a gene that might be associated with suicide. On another piece of legislation that we're working on, we're also going to put new rules in place regarding biobanking. And that one, hopefully, we'll be able to get that through Parliament shortly as well. So it deals with transplantation of tissue and also create new rules for biobanking.
The conference on mental health in Guyana is facilitated by the University of Guyana in collaboration with the Columbus University and their suicide experts and other stakeholders in the Ministry of Health in Guyana. Guyanese doctors and ultimately patients are poised to benefit from specialized training in health sector research under an accord between the Ministry of Health and Canada's McMaster University. Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony says this is a big deal for postgraduate training of doctors. The Health Minister says McMaster has agreed to facilitate the training of Guyanese physicians in various subspecialties. In return, he says McMaster will continue to expand its global health and research initiatives with a major focus in Guyana. Dr. Anthony finalized a memorandum of understanding with the publicly funded McMaster University during a recent visit to Toronto and Hamilton, Ontario. He was accompanied by Associate Professor of Pediatrics at McMaster University, Dr. Narendra Singh, who is also the president of Guyana Help the Kids organization, a non-governmental organization partnering with Guyana to address infant mortality. The Health Ministry is reporting an overall reduction in positive COVID-19 cases, but expresses concern about the high numbers still in Region 3, Essequibo Islands, West Demerara. Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony says there is a significant reduction in epicenter Region 4, Demerara, Mahaica.
So right now we have 2,696 cases across Guyana. The cases in Region 4 has dropped, so we have 938 cases now in Region 4. Unfortunately, the cases in Region 3 remain high with 1,107 cases. And we are monitoring what is happening in Region 6 with 233 cases, and in Region 10 with 173 cases. But generally, the trend in Region 4 is looking good because it's the first time we are now, after a long while, that we are below 1,000.
During his COVID update today, Dr. Anthony said there is a corresponding reduction in persons being hospitalized.
Of these active cases, we currently have 70 persons that are in hospitals across the country. Right now, of the 2,696 active cases, we have 70 cases that are in hospitals. We have 40 persons who are at the Ocean View Hospital, with 12 of those persons in the hospital, in the ICU. We also have 5 persons right now who's at GPHC maternity, and the rest of the persons are distributed to various regional hospitals. So right now, we are monitoring 12 persons in the ICU at Ocean View.
The ministry says 251,908 or 49% of adults are fully vaccinated and 386,350 or 75% of adults are partially vaccinated. A 16-year-old boy is among 4 persons charged with the murder of a man late last month at Parika East Bank, Essequibo. They are all accused of the murder of Trevor Allen of Parika on October 31. Police say the teenager was at the weekend remanded to the Juvenile Holding Center at Sophia, Greater Georgetown. The adults who were charged with the murder of R26-year-old Eshwar Sugdeo, 23-year-old Chaitran Prasad, and 18-year-old Navindra Sugrim, all of Parika. They will all reappear in court on November 9. Allen was beaten, chopped, and stabbed to death during an argument. In the region, Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister Gaston Brown says measures will be put in place to enforce the recently announced vaccine mandate affecting the private sector. The Antigua newsroom spoke with the Prime Minister, Gaston Brown.
Now, within the private sector, we would have introduced some mandates about a week and a half ago. I believe that they become effective shortly as well. And we now have to look at the mechanism that we'll be putting in place to monitor these private sector entities that are now legally mandated to get their staff vaccinated. In fact, next week at Cabinet, we'll be looking at the fines to determine whether or not the fines are sufficient to serve as a deterrent, because there may be some employers who may not be moving with alacrity to ensure that the staff is vaccinated or the staff members are vaccinated. Now, I believe that the regulation that we passed about a week and a half ago, it stated that all employers with 5 or more staff, that all of their staff members are required to be vaccinated. And we'll be putting systems in place to strictly enforce that policy. So may as well, they act voluntarily, because at the end of the day, we're not playing when it comes to, protecting people against hospitalizations and deaths. And at the same time, we're not playing when it comes to protecting the country.
Private sector businesses in Antigua and Barbuda with 5 or more employees must ensure that all staff members are vaccinated. The Prime Minister warned of fines if they do not get the jab. The Prime Minister of the Bahamas, Philip Davis, says he is not keen to allow oil drilling in the Bahamas and is completely opposed to oil exploitation in the country. According to the Tribune News, the Prime Minister made the remarks after attending the COP26 climate conference. Prime Minister Davis, after his conversations with several world leaders and other technical people, says he's not minded to allow exploitation and drilling. He says the discussion at COP26 also focuses on the elimination of fossil fuel, which most countries are talking about eliminating 20 to 50 years in the future. The Bahamian Prime Minister says he'll be moving towards monetizing carbon credits, and should the need for new revenue streams arise, that will provide Bahamians with the needed services from the monetization of the carbon credits. Back in Antigua and Barbuda, the Prime Minister Gaston Brown says he'll be writing the United Kingdom government to ask that country to earmark a portion of the Merck for CARICOM countries. Britain granted conditional authorization last Thursday for the world's first pill designed to treat symptomatic COVID-19. The UK has agreed to purchase 480,000 courses, with the first deliveries expected in November. Observer Antigua News quotes Prime Minister Brown and the chairman of CARICOM as saying he'll write to the United Kingdom to request a portion of the Merck pills be secured for CARICOM countries. The regional chair indicated that he'll also request the United States to provide doses of another antiviral pill manufactured by Pfizer and awaiting approval in the U.S. The Merck pill was licensed for adults aged 18 and over who have tested positive for COVID-19 and have at least one risk factor for developing severe disease, such as obesity or heart disease. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration announced last month that it would convene a panel of independent experts to scrutinize the pill's safety and effectiveness in late November. Meanwhile, the drug maker Pfizer says that clinical trials of its experimental COVID-19 pill have been so far successful in preventing people from becoming hospitalized or dying from the virus that it's stopping the studies early in the hope that the general public might benefit. The Inter-American Development Bank, IDB, has approved $65 million for non-reimbursable financing to contribute to the sustainable economic development of northern Haiti. According to a Loop News report, the financing will target promoting the necessary conditions for the establishment and expansion of companies in the Caracal Industries Park. The IDB says the main strategy of the program is to establish the operational and infrastructure base necessary for the PIC to become a successful industrial park in the Caribbean, attracting investment and becoming self-sustaining. The Washington-based financial institution says the new operation will increase its total investment in the Caracal Industrial Park to $263.5 million in fulfillment of the original commitment to finance the infrastructure required for the park to generate 20,000 jobs. And now we go to the BBC World News for the World News.
BBC News with Sue Montgomery. Poland has deployed extra troops and police on its eastern border, where thousands of migrants are trying to enter the country from Belarus. Warsaw says its neighbour is trying to provoke a major confrontation by encouraging people to force their way across. There's been strong condemnation by Poland's allies, who believe Belarus is acting in retaliation against Western sanctions. A US State Department spokesman, Ned Price, urged the Belarusian President, Alexander Lukashenko, to stop exploiting migrants.
We call on the regime to immediately halt its campaign of orchestrating and coercing irregular migrant flows across its borders into Europe. As long as the regime in Belarus refuses to respect its international obligations and commitments, we will continue to pressure Lukashenko and will not lessen our calls for accountability.
The former president of the United States, Barack Obama, has told the COP26 summit that the world isn't doing anywhere near enough to fight climate change. He called on young activists to stay angry, encouraging people everywhere to put pressure on governments and companies. Mr. Obama said he recognised that international cooperation has waned, but said the climate crisis, which affects everyone, should go beyond political differences.
I understand that it's harder to get international cooperation. There are more global tensions. But there is one thing that should transcend our day-to-day politics and normal geopolitics, and that is climate change. It's not just that we can't afford to go backward, we can't afford to stay where we are. The world has to step up, and it has to step up now.
The US Justice Department has charged a Ukrainian man over a huge ransomware attack on an American company in July that affected 1,500 businesses worldwide. Yaroslav Wasinski was arrested in Poland last month. The hack targeted the software firm Kaseya. Many of Kaseya's customers became infected and transferred large sums of money to the attackers to regain control of their accounts. The Pakistani government says it's agreed a ceasefire with local Taliban militants. The move was confirmed by the banned TTP group. Here's Anbara Sanitarajan.
The Pakistani government last month announced that it was holding talks with some factions of the banned Tehrik-i-Taliban, or TTP, seeking reconciliation. Pakistan's information minister on Monday said the Taliban government in Kabul had acted as a mediator for the negotiations. The latest move has opened the possibility of a peace accord that could end years of bloodshed, particularly in the tribal regions of the northwest. The TTP are a separate movement from the Afghan Taliban, though thousands of its fighters are thought to be based in Afghanistan.
BBC News. The former president of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, who's trying to negotiate an end to the war in Ethiopia, has denied that his attempts at mediation are unwelcome. Mr. Obasanjo is acting as an envoy for the African Union. He's met the head of the Tigray People's Liberation Front, which is fighting the Ethiopian government. A TPLF official, Getachew Reda, described the talks as fruitful, but he said its forces would keep advancing unless the Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, lifted the blockade of the Tigray region.
As long as the chokehold is maintained by Abiy, as long as he still thinks he can carve our people into submission, as long as he is presiding over a status quo where our children are dying from hunger and starvation, we'll continue to take appropriate measures.
Many of the 115 people who died in a massive fuel tanker explosion in Sierra Leone have been buried in a mass ceremony. The vast majority of the victims were burned beyond recognition after fuel leaked before catching fire at a busy junction. Hospitals have been overwhelmed. The health authorities say they're desperate for more donations of medical supplies to treat dozens of people in hospital with serious burns. An indefinite general strike is underway in Bolivia in protest at plans to give the state widespread new powers. The socialist government of President Luis Arce says the laws are needed to tackle what it calls illicit profits. But some unions, along with members of the opposition, claim the real objective is to enable officials to seize private property. Amnesty International has condemned the jailing of a female actor by a Houthi-run court in Yemen. The rights organisation says Intisar al-Hamadi was sentenced to 5 years in prison for violating public morality. She had appeared in online photographs without a headscarf, defying Yemeni social norms. BBC News.
That's the news to the moment.
After a hard day's work, a lime at the workplace would be great, and a lime at the workplace with KFC would be even better, with a wide choice of finger-licking meals in a wide range of sizes. It could be the celebration of a colleague's birthday or promotion, or just a lime for no reason at all. Any lime, anytime, anywhere is better and tastier with a delicious meal from any of KFC's 9 locations, including the Amazonia Mall at Providence. KFC.
It's finger-licking good.
Now, in the news, a recap of the highlights. The former head of the Special Organized Crime Unit of the Guyana Police Force has turned himself over to police investigators after a wanted bulletin was issued for him last week. Former President David Granger warned Suriname to stop issuing threats of force to acquire the New River Triangle and use it as leverage to sign agreements. A civil society organization, Article 13, has criticized President Irfan Ali for allegedly breaching the Constitution by not taking steps to appoint several constitutional commissions. Regionally, Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Gaston Brown, says measures will be put in place to enforce vaccine mandates in the private sector. And Mr. Brown says he's requesting antiviral medication pills for COVID treatment from the United Kingdom and the United States for CARICOM countries. Internationally, Poland says it has repelled attempts by migrants to enter the country at its eastern border with Belarus, warning that thousands more were on their way. The news came to you with the compliments of Kentucky Fried Chicken KFC.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.
Now join the BBC World Service.
Coming up in World Business Report in just a moment, Elon Musk has asked his Twitter followers to tell him whether he should sell 10% of his shares in Tesla. His followers said, sell. So what happens next? And after all the fine words at COP26 by governments, the negotiations now get down to brass tacks and money. Is the rich world willing to pay the poor to address the causes and the effects of climate change? All that in World Business Report after the news.
BBC News. Poland has deployed extra troops along its eastern frontier with Belarus and will close a major border crossing as it attempts to stop thousands of migrants trying to enter the country. Warsaw says Belarus is trying to provoke a major confrontation by encouraging people to force their way across. Belarus denies that. A Ukrainian man has been charged in the US over a huge ransomware attack on the American company Kaseya in July that affected 1,500 businesses worldwide. Yaroslav Vazinski was arrested last month. A fire at a school in southern Niger has killed at least 26 children. Many others are being treated in hospital for severe burns. The blaze engulfed the school's classrooms made of straw in the city of Maradi. The cause of the fire is not yet clear. Pakistan's government says it's agreed a ceasefire with local Taliban militants. The move was confirmed by the band Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, or TTP. The information minister said the Afghan Taliban had acted as a mediator. Many of the 115 people who died in a massive fuel tanker explosion in Sierra Leone have been buried in a mass ceremony. The vast majority of victims were burned beyond recognition. An indefinite general strike is underway in Bolivia in protest at plans to give the state widespread new powers. The government says the laws are needed to tackle what it calls illicit profits, but opponents fear the real objective is to seize private property. The opposition in North Macedonia has announced a vote of confidence in the government after the Prime Minister, Zoran Zaev, failed to honour a pledge to resign. Mr Zaev had said he would stand down after his party did badly in local elections last month. BBC News.
This is World Business Report from the BBC World Service. I'm Jamie Robertson. Welcome to the programme. In a moment, we're going to be looking at how Tesla's boss, Elon Musk, has been shaking up his shares to make a political point. At a glance to technology that could help detect illegal loggers tearing down the trees in the Indonesian rainforest.
Using sound as a mechanism to understand, the different sounds of the forest, everything from animals to birds to things like, chainsaws and trucks and human voices.
That's all coming up in just a second, but let us start with Tesla. Investors in the electric car maker are used to fairly wild rides. Despite massive growth, it came for a few years back now, according to its founder and chief executive Elon Musk, within a month of bankruptcy. Musk himself has played fast and